Skyrim is filled with places that are dangerous. Caves crawling with Falmer, ancient ruins guarded by Draga, and forts occupied by bandits all pose obvious threats to anyone who enters them. But danger isn't always what makes a place problematic. Some locations are broken by politics, others are trapped in endless conflict, plagued by corruption, cursed by ancient history, or home to problems that can never truly be solved. These are the places where the issues run far deeper than the enemies you fight. Even after the Dragonborn leaves, the underlying problems remain. Whether it's exploitation, prejudice, crime, betrayal, or communities held together by little more than hope, these locations reveal a side of Skyrim that isn't defeated with a sword or a spell. Because sometimes the greatest threat isn't what's hiding inside a dungeon, it's the place itself. And these are the most problematic places in all of Skyrim. At first glance, Ivarstead seems like one of the safest places in all of Skyrim. Nestled at the foot of the throat of the world, surrounded by rushing rivers, towering mountains, and dense forests, the village feels far removed from the civil war tearing the province apart. There are no city walls, no political intrigue, no criminal underworld like Riften, and no visible corruption like Markarth. Pilgrims regularly pass through on their journey to High Hrothgar. Locals quietly go about their daily lives, and the entire settlement projects an image of peace. But the longer you stay in Ivarstead, the more cracks begin to appear beneath the peaceful surface. Beneath its tranquil appearance lies one of Skyrim's strangest murder mysteries. A village haunted by superstition, conspiracy, and suspicion. The ghost of Narfi's murdered sister, Rhaeda, lingers nearby. The Dark Brotherhood eventually sends the Dragonborn to assassinate Narfi himself, and several unanswered questions continue to fuel speculation more than a decade after Skyrim's release. Combined with Ivarstead's remarkable isolation, these mysteries create a village that feels quietly unsettling in ways many players never fully appreciate. Unlike other problematic places where the danger is obvious, Ivarstead's problems are hidden beneath everyday life, making them all the more disturbing. Perhaps the most famous mystery surrounding the village is the disappearance and death of Rhaeda. Very early into exploring Ivarstead, players encounter Narfi. At first, he appears to be little more than another tragic NPC. He wanders aimlessly, speaking to himself, constantly asks whether anyone has been able to see his sister. The villagers largely dismiss him because he's unstable. Many assume his grief has simply driven him mad, yet beneath his rambling lies a genuine mystery. Rhaeda really has disappeared, and nobody seems particularly interested in finding out why. Eventually, players discover her body submerged in the river just outside the village. She didn't simply leave, she died, she was murdered. That revelation immediately transforms what initially seemed like a story about grief into something much darker. The circumstances surrounding Rhaeda's death remain remarkably vague. The game never explicitly identifies her killer. There is no final confession, no dramatic confrontation, no quest leading to justice. Instead, players are left with fragments, enough information to raise question, but not enough to answer them. That ambiguity has kept discussions alive within the Skyrim community for years. Some believe her death was accidental, others suspect murder. The evidence supports neither explanation completely, and perhaps that's precisely why the mystery continues to fascinate players. One particularly popular theory suggests that Willem, the owner of the inn, may know considerably more than he admits. After all, he tells stories. He shapes local narrative. He seems remarkably comfortable dismissing unusual events. This is no concrete evidence implicating him, but the fact that players continue suspecting ordinary villagers demonstrate how effectively Bethesda cultivates uncertainty. Everyone becomes a potential suspect, because nobody ever receives complete answers. Narfi himself becomes another source of discomfort. His mental state raises difficult questions about how the village treats its most vulnerable resident. Most locals simply tolerate him, few genuinely help him. His grief becomes background noise, people grow accustomed to his suffering, and that quiet neglect feels surprisingly realistic. Communities sometimes normalize tragedy simply because it persists long enough. Nafi slowly becomes invisible. His pain continues. Life around him carries on. That indifference arguably says as much about Ivarstead as the mystery itself. Then the Dark Brotherhood becomes involved. Long after helping Nafi search for Raider, players may eventually receive a contract ordering his assassination. This twist remains one of Skyrim's most disturbing uses of delayed storytelling. Nafi begins as someone deserving sympathy. Later, the game quietly asks you to kill him. No explanation accompanies the contract. No motive is revealed. Someone simply wants Nafi dead. The obvious question immediately follows: who? The answer never comes. Players have spent years proposing possibilities. Did someone wish to silence him? Was it an act of mercy? Did Nafi unknowingly witness something? Or was the contract completely unrelated to Raider's death? Bethesda deliberately refused to clarify. That silence becomes part of the mystery itself. The contract transforms Nafi from victim into target, without ever explaining why. That unanswered question continues haunting the village long after players leave. The geography of Ivarstead contributes enormously to these mysteries. Unlike larger settlements connected to major roads, Ivarstead feels genuinely isolated. Mountains surround it, the river limits movement, the throat of the world dominates the horizon. Only a handful of routes connect the village to the wider province. Isolation naturally breeds rumours. Limited information, tight-knit communities. Everyone knows everyone else, which makes Raider's death even stranger. How does someone disappear from such a small settlement without anyone learning the truth? The village almost feels too small for secrets, yet secrets flourish there anyway. Pilgrims passing through create another fascinating contrast. Every day, strangers arrive seeking spiritual enlightenment at High Hrothgar. The village exists along one of Skyrim's most sacred journeys. People pursuing wisdom literally walk through a community unable to solve its own mysteries. The symbolism is striking. Knowledge passes through Ivarstead. Answers never seem to remain. Its proximity to High Hrothgar also creates unusual emotional tension as well. The Greybeards represent clarity, discipline, ancient understanding. Below them sits a village defined by uncertainty. The mountain almost watches silently over problems it never addresses. That juxtaposition feels intentional. Even the 7,000 steps contribute indirectly to Ivarstead's atmosphere. Pilgrims constantly arrive and depart, visitors rarely stay long, and the village functions more as a stopping point rather than a destination. People move through, few truly look beneath the surface. That transient population makes secrets easier to hide. Travelers hear rumours, continue climbing, and life resumes. The deeper mysteries remain with the villagers themselves. Compared to settlements like Riverwood, the contrast becomes surprisingly revealing. Riverwood also sits in relative isolation, yet it feels welcoming, open, community-driven. Ivarstead feels quieter, more reserved. Its residents rarely display the same warmth. Conversations often carry subtle tension. Not overt hostility, but simple caution. As though everyone knows more than they choose to say. The supernatural elements surrounding the village further complicate its identity. Raider's spirit remains trapped after death. Players eventually help her move on by recovering her necklace. That resolution offers emotional closure, but it never resolves the larger mystery. The ghost confirms tragedy occurred, not why it occurred. Even after laying Raider to rest, uncertainty still lingers. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Ivarstead is how ordinary it appears despite everything hidden beneath its surface. There are no spectacular ruins dominating the skyline, no Daedric shrines, no vampire castles. Nothing visually announces the village as dangerous. Players lower their guard. Only gradually do they realise how many unanswered questions surround the settlement. That slow realisation makes the location considerably more memorable than immediate spectacle ever could. The villagers themselves reinforce this atmosphere through subtle behaviour rather than dramatic dialogue. Nobody openly panics, nobody desperately demands justice. Instead, life genuinely continues. The murder becomes another accepted part of the village's history. That acceptance feels almost more disturbing than outrage would, because it suggests unresolved tragedy has simply become normal. There are also broader themes at work within Ivarstead that extend beyond individual characters. The village represents how isolation affects communities. Distance doesn't merely separate people physically, it also separates them from scrutiny, from outside investigation, from accountability. What happens in Ivarstead largely stays in Ivarstead. That dynamic has existed throughout history in countless remote settlements. Bethesda quietly captures it here. Even the natural beauty surrounding the village contributes to its unsettling quality. The waterfalls, the pine forests, mountain air, everything encourages relaxation. The environment promises peace. That makes discovering death and conspiracy feel strangely inappropriate, almost intrusive. Beauty becomes camouflage. Ultimately, Ivarstead earns its place among Skyrim's most problematic locations because its central issues resist resolution. Players can help Raider's spirit. They can choose Nafi's fate. They can complete every available quest. Yet the fundamental questions remain unanswered. Who killed Raider? Why was Nafi marked for death? How much do the villagers truly know? The game never provides certainty. Instead, it leaves players with implication, speculation, and unease. Combined with the village's remarkable isolation, its position beneath Skyrim's holiest mountain, and its quiet refusal to explain itself, Ivarstead becomes far more than a simple stopping point on the road to High Hrothgar. It becomes a reminder that some of Skyrim's deepest mysteries are not hidden inside ancient ruins or forgotten tombs. They're hidden inside ordinary villages, where peaceful landscapes conceal unanswered crimes, suspicious silences, and tragedies that everyone has learned to live beside. And perhaps that's what makes Ivarstead so problematic. Not that terrible things happened there, but that no one ever truly discovers why. There are plenty of settlements in Skyrim that suffer from obvious problems. Some are crippled by poverty, others are plagued by civil war, crime, or political corruption. Kynes Grove is different. At first glance, it appears to be one of the quieter communities in Eastmarch. It consists of an inn, a working mine, and a small population trying to make a living beneath the shadow of the volcanic slopes surrounding Windhelm. Life there seems simple, honest even. The people work the mines, tend their homes, and go about their daily routines with little fanfare. But that peaceful image masks one of the most unsettling realities of any settlement in Skyrim. Just beyond the village lies an ancient dragon burial mound, one that most of the residents unknowingly built their lives beside. Unlike many dangerous locations in Skyrim that remain abandoned or isolated, Kynes Grove asks ordinary people to live within walking distance of an ancient creature capable of bringing devastation to the entire settlement. When Alduin eventually arrives to resurrect the dragon during the main quest, the village's greatest problem suddenly becomes visible. Yet what's truly disturbing is that the realization that danger is always there, long before the Dragonborn arrived, and long before the dragon returned. The people of Kynes Grove had unknowingly spent years living beside one of the most dangerous places in all of Eastmarch. What makes Kynes Grove so problematic is not simply the dragon attack itself. It's what the attack reveals. Throughout Skyrim, dragon burial mounds are scattered across the landscape. Many sit deep within forests, others rest on isolated mountainsides or forgotten plains. Most are intentionally separated from civilization. Kynes Grove breaks that pattern. Its burial mound sits almost within sight of the settlement. close enough that villagers could unknowingly walk past it during their daily routines, close enough that children might grow up considering it little more than another hill in the landscape. The danger isn't distant, it's woven directly into everyday life. That proximity immediately raises uncomfortable questions. Who chose to establish a settlement here? Did they know what the mound actually was, or had its true purpose been forgotten over the centuries? Given Skyrim's long history, either explanation seems plausible. Ancient knowledge disappears surprisingly often throughout the province. Ruins become landmarks, temples become caves, battlefields become farmland. Perhaps the mound simply became another feature of the landscape, something people stopped questioning generations ago. If that's true, it makes the situation even more unsettling, because it means an entire community unknowingly built its future beside the remains of an ancient dragon. The arrival of Whiterun also completely changes how players view the village. Up until that point, Kynes Grove feels relatively ordinary. Then everything changes within moments. Whiterun descends from the sky, the burial mound erupts, and the dragon returns to life. Suddenly, a peaceful mining settlement becomes the stage for one of the Dragonborn's earliest confrontations with Skyrim's greatest threat. The sequence is spectacular, but beneath that spectacle lies something much darker. The villagers never stood a chance. If the Dragonborn had arrived even slightly later, Kynes Grove could have become another Helgen. That realization permanently alters the player's perception of the settlement. After witnessing the new dragon emerge, it's impossible to see the burial mound as harmless ever again. The psychological implications for the residents are fascinating to consider as well. Imagine discovering that your home has been built beside the grave of an ancient monster, not metaphorically, literally. Every day spent working, every evening spent resting, every childhood memory tied to that landscape. Suddenly, those memories become tainted by the knowledge that unimaginable destruction was sleeping only a short distance away. Even after the new dragon is defeated, that awareness wouldn't simply disappear. The mound remains, its history remains, and the fear remains as well. For the people of Kynes Grove, ordinary life would never truly feel ordinary again. That lingering anxiety is something that Skyrim never directly explores, but it feels entirely believable. Unlike cities protected by large guard forces or imposing walls, Kynes Grove possesses almost no meaningful defences. Its size becomes another part of its problem. There are no battlements, no standing army, very few trained warriors. Should another dragon emerge nearby, resistance would only be impossible. The settlement depends almost entirely upon outside intervention. That vulnerability defines much of Kynes Grove's identity. Its residents live with risks they have no realistic means of controlling. The mining industry further complicates this picture. Kynes Grove exists because valuable resources exist beneath the surrounding land. People settled there for practical reasons. Opportunity outweighed caution. That mirrors countless real settlements throughout history. Communities often emerge in dangerous places because valuable resources justify the risk. Volcanoes, floodplains, mountain passes. Kynes Grove simply adds dragons to that list. The village survives because the mine matters, not because the location is safe. Its geography creates another subtle problem. East March already possesses one of Skyrim's harshest environments: steam vents, volcanic soil, ash-covered landscapes. The region constantly reminds players that nature itself can be dangerous. The Dragon Mound almost feels like an extension of that hostility. Rather than existing separately from the environment, it becomes part of it. The land itself seems unwilling to offer lasting security. Even before Alduin appears, the landscape carries a quiet sense of unease. The dragon simply gives that unease a face. Comparisons with Helgen become increasingly unavoidable. Both settlements become defined by dragons. Both are caught completely unprepared. Both represent ordinary communities interrupted by extraordinary events. Yet there is one crucial difference. Helgen's destruction happens almost immediately. Kyne's Grove continues existing afterward. That continuation arguably makes its situation more complicated. The residents must carry on living where everything happened. Every glance towards the burial mound becomes a reminder. Trauma doesn't disappear simply because reconstruction is possible, it lingers. Another fascinating aspect of Kyne's Grove is how normal its residents remain despite their circumstances. Characters continue discussing work, mining, daily concerns. Life moves forward. That resilience feels realistic. Communities often normalize extraordinary circumstances because they have little alternative. People still need food, shelter, income. Even after witnessing unimaginable events, practical concerns return surprisingly quickly. Skyrim quietly captures that reality. The village survives, but survival is not the same as peace. There is also something symbolically powerful about Alduin choosing Kyne's Grove for one of his earliest resurrections. He could have awakened dragons almost anywhere. Instead, he selects a burial mound overlooking an inhabited settlement. Whether intentional or coincidental, the message feels clear. The ancient world is reclaiming the modern one. History refuses to remain buried. Civilization has unknowingly grown upon foundations it barely understands. Kyne's Grove becomes the perfect illustration of that idea. The past literally rises beneath the feet of the present. Even after completing the main quest, players often revisit Kyne's Grove differently. The village itself changes very little. Its buildings remain, its routines continue, yet player knowledge fundamentally alters the atmosphere. The settlement never quite regains its innocence. Every peaceful visit carries memories of Alden circling overhead. That lingering association becomes part of the location itself. Compared to other problematic places throughout Skyrim, Kyne's Grove's issues feel unusually invisible. Markarth's corruption is obvious. Riften's crime openly shapes the city. Morthal's fear permeates everyday life. Kyne's Grove hides its greatest danger beneath the ground. Its problems exist silently, waiting. That hidden quality arguably makes it more unsettling than many openly dangerous settlements. Players can prepare for visible threats. Buried ones are much harder to anticipate. There is also a broader theme present within Kyne's Grove that extends beyond dragons. The village represents humanity's tendency to forget. Generations pass, knowledge fades, warnings disappear. Eventually, people build homes beside things their ancestors may once have feared. That cycle appears repeatedly throughout Skyrim. Ancient tombs become ruins. Sacred sites become abandoned. Powerful relics become forgotten. Kyne's Grove simply demonstrates the consequences of that forgetfulness more dramatically than most locations. Its greatest problem isn't merely proximity to danger, it's the ignorance of that danger. Ultimately, Kyne's Grove earns its place among the most problematic locations in Skyrim because its central issues cannot truly be solved. The Dragonborn defeats the dragon, Alduin is eventually destroyed in the end, yet the settlement remains exactly where it has always been. Built beside ancient history, surrounded by harsh landscape, dependent upon vulnerable industries. Forever associated with one of the most significant moments in Skyrim's main quest. The dragon may be gone, but the implications remain. Its residents live with the knowledge that their peaceful village was never truly peaceful at all, that beneath the quiet routines of mining, farming and everyday life, unimaginable power had been sleeping only a few hundred meters away, waiting for the day it would awaken. And perhaps that's what makes Kyne's Grove so uniquely problematic. Not that disaster struck, but that disaster had always been there, buried beneath the surface, silently waiting for the right moment to remind everyone just how fragile even the quietest corners of Skyrim can be. Few places in Skyrim and its expansions generate frustration in quite the same way as White Ridge Barrow. On paper, it has everything a memorable dungeon should have. It's an ancient Nordic ruin buried beneath the frozen landscape of Solstheim, steeped in mystery tied to the Dragonborn expansion and filled with dangerous enemies guarding valuable rewards. It sounds like the perfect recipe for an unforgettable adventure. But for many players, Whiterun Barrow becomes unforgettable for entirely different reasons. Rather than leaving with memories of fascinating lore or satisfying exploration, players often remember getting lost, becoming overwhelmed by enemies, wrestling with awkward dungeon layouts, or encountering bugs that interrupt the experience altogether. It is one of those rare locations where nearly every aspect of the dungeon seems designed to test the player's patience just as much as their combat ability. Whiterun Barrow isn't necessarily the hardest dungeon in Skyrim, nor is it the deadliest. Instead, it earns its reputation because so many small frustrations combine into one exhausting experience. Individually, none of these problems would make the ruin particularly infamous. Together, however, they transform Whiterun Barrow into one of the most problematic places in the entire game. The first issue appears before you even step inside. Whiterun Barrow sits in one of the harshest environments on Solstheim. Everything about the surrounding landscape feels hostile. Ash from the Red Mountain drifts through the air, snow covers the ground, visibility constantly shifts depending on the weather. Unlike many Nordic ruins that stand prominently against Skyrim's mountains, Whiterun Barrow almost blends into the landscape. The journey itself can already feel disorienting. Players often arrive slightly worn down before the dungeon has even begun. That atmosphere sets the tone remarkably well. The ruin doesn't welcome exploration. It almost seems determined to discourage it. Once inside, the layout immediately begins creating problems. Whiterun Barrow is not particularly enormous by Skyrim's standards, but its internal structure often feels more confusing than its actual size would suggest. Passages twist back on themselves, rooms connect through unexpected routes, vertical movement frequently changes your sense of direction. Rather than flowing naturally from one chamber to the next, progression sometimes feels fragmented. Players regularly find themselves stopping to reorient themselves, checking the local map, retracing steps, looking for passages they accidentally overlooked. Confusion gradually replaces momentum. That loss of rhythm becomes surprisingly significant. The best Skyrim dungeons usually encourage forward movement. Whiterun Barrow repeatedly interrupts it. Part of this confusion comes from the dungeon's visual design. Many sections share remarkably similar architecture. Ancient stone corridors, Nordic carvings, frozen chambers, everything begins blending together after extended exploration. Distinct landmarks become surprisingly rare. When environments lack visual variety, navigation naturally becomes more difficult. Players struggle to remember where they have already been, or where they still need to go. The dungeon doesn't intentionally become a maze, it simply begins feeling like one. Enemy placement only amplifies these navigational problems. Whiterun Barrow contains a mixture of opponents capable of creating constant pressure throughout exploration. Rather than spacing encounters evenly, the dungeon often feels as though danger arrives in clusters. You clear one difficult fight, turn a corner, and another immediately begins. Rarely does the ruin provide long periods of calm. That relentless pacing gradually becomes exhausting, especially for characters entering the dungeon at lower levels. One of the biggest contributors to Whiterun Barrow's reputation is the presence of the Reeklings alongside the dungeon's more traditional Nordic threats. Reeklings are already divisive enemies throughout the Dragonborn expansion. They move erratically, attack in groups, frequently use ranged weapons, and rarely behave predictably. Inside Whiterun Barrow, those characteristics become even more frustrating. Confined corridors reduce opportunities to maneuver. Projectiles arrive from awkward angles, close quarters make multiple enemies feel significantly more dangerous. Players often spend more time reacting than planning. Combat becomes chaotic rather than tactical. Then there are the spiders. Whiterun Barrow introduces the infamous spider scrolls through the work of the eccentric wizard Alenia Mothrin and the unique spider crafting laboratory hidden within the ruin. While this mechanic is certainly creative, reaching it requires navigating a dungeon already filled with hostile encounters. Many players appreciate the concept, fewer enjoy the journey required to access it. The laboratory itself feels almost disconnected from the rest of the dungeon, interesting mechanically, but buried behind an exploration experience that has already tested most players' patience. The final encounters continue this trend by asking players to fight increasingly dangerous enemies after an already lengthy expedition. Normally, this kind of escalation feels rewarding. In Whiterun Barrow, however, it often feels draining. The dungeon asks for sustained concentration over a long period of time. Small mistakes accumulate, resources begin to run low, health potions disappear, magicka reserves shrink, fatigue genuinely builds. By the final rooms, many players simply want the dungeon to end. Not because the challenge is impossible, but because the pacing rarely allows them to recover. Bugs unfortunately add another layer to the experience. Whiterun Barrow has developed a reputation among some players for various technical issues, particularly depending on platform and version. Quest objectives occasionally fail to update correctly. Certain interactions can become unreliable, enemy behaviour sometimes behaves unpredictably. Navigation problems become worse when technical problems interrupt progression. Not every player experiences these issues. Many complete the dungeon without incident, but the possibility alone contributes to its reputation. Problematic locations rarely earn that label through design alone. Technical inconsistencies often become part of the conversation as well. Compared to other Nordic ruins, Whiterun Barrow occupies an unusual middle ground. It lacks the enormous scale of places like Labyrinthian or Blackreach. It also lacks the straightforward simplicity of smaller barrows scattered throughout Skyrim. Instead, it feels unusually dense. Every section demands attention, every encounter requires effort. There are very few moments where players simply relax and enjoy the scenery. The dungeon constantly asks something from them. Sometimes that's exciting, sometimes it becomes exhausting. Comparisons with Valok's tomb are particularly revealing. Both appear within the Dragonborn expansion and feature impressive Nordic architecture. Yet Valok's tomb generally receives praise for its stronger narrative focus and clearer progression. Whiterun Barrow instead becomes remembered for mechanical frustrations. The difference illustrates how important dungeon flow really is. Beautiful environments alone cannot sustain an enjoyable experience. The player needs direction, momentum, breathing room. Whiterun Barrow occasionally struggles to provide all three. Even the reward structure creates mixed feelings. The spider scroll crafting system is genuinely unique within Skyrim. Few locations introduce entirely new mechanics. That originality deserves recognition. Yet many players finish the dungeon without ever making extensive use of spider scrolls afterward. The reward therefore becomes highly situational. For some builds it's fascinating, for others largely irrelevant. When the journey feels frustrating, situational rewards naturally become more disappointing. Another subtle issue lies in player expectation. Whiterun Barrow looks like a conventional Nordic ruin. Players enter expecting familiar gameplay. Instead, they encounter a location blending Nordic tomb exploration with Dragonborn exclusive mechanics, wrinkling encounters, unusual laboratory systems, and unpredictable pacing. The dungeon constantly shifts identity. That unpredictability can certainly be interesting, but it also contributes to the feeling that Whiterun Barrow never quite settles into a comfortable rhythm. It always feels slightly at odds with itself. Ultimately, Whiterun Barrow earns its place among the most problematic locations in Skyrim, not because it completely fails, but because it comes remarkably close to greatness, while repeatedly allowing small frustrations to interrupt the experience. Confusing navigation, relentless combat encounters, erratic enemies, occasional technical issues, and uneven pacing. Each problem seems manageable on its own. Together they accumulate into something much larger. A dungeon where exploration often feels more tiring than exciting, where victory sometimes brings relief more than satisfaction, and where players leave remembering not simply what they discovered beneath the frozen landscape of Solstheim, but how much effort it took just to reach the end. White Ridge Barrow remains an ambitious location filled with creative ideas, but it is also a reminder that even the most fascinating dungeons can become problematic when too many challenges begin competing for the player's attention at once. Every city in Skyrim wears a mask. Solitude, the seat of politics, hides its rot beneath marble. Markarth pretends its ruins aren't still ticking with old war machines. Windhelm clutches its past so tightly it can't see its present crumbling. But Riften? Riften doesn't wear a mask, it wears a smirk. It's the city that knows it's broken, that flaunts it, that whispers behind every corner that law and loyalty are just words, and gold is the only truth worth following. I wouldn't say that Riften is the most dangerous city in Skyrim. It's not the largest or the oldest or even the most important, but it is undeniably the most problematic, and maybe that's why it feels so real. Riften sits tucked in the southeastern corner of Skyrim, nestled between crumbling mountains and thick, swampy forests. It should be beautiful, and it once was. The docks sparkle in the morning mist, golden leaves fall softly in the courtyard, and for a brief moment, it feels like the city could be the autumn jewel of the province. But take 5 steps past the gate and the illusion cracks. You're greeted by a shakedown, a guard demanding a bribe, an old man shouting about the Blackbriar family, an alchemist muttering about betrayals. Even the beggars here seem less sad and more suspicious. Riften isn't hiding its flaws, it's basically advertising them. Ask any local who really runs Riften, and you'll get the same name, Maven Blackbriar. She's not Jarl, she doesn't wear armour, but she controls everything. The meadery, the guards, the courts, even the Thieves' Guild bows to their name. Maven is Skyrim's closest thing to a mob boss, a woman whose power is unspoken, unquestioned, and utterly unearned through democratic means. You'll hear her name dropped in Solitude, whispered in Whiterun, threatened in Windhelm. She doesn't need to shout. Everyone else does it for her. And that, in many ways, is the core of Riften's problem. It's a city where power exists without responsibility, where Maven's word is law, and law is just a formality. Riften is also home to the Thieves' Guild, a faction that on paper should represent cleverness, stealth, and rebellion. But in practice, they're tired. The guild is a shadow of what it once was. Leadership squabbles, betrayals abound. Their safe house is literally falling apart. Ratway walls cracked, members demoralised, influence fading. The once great syndicate of information smuggling and intrigue has become a gang of petty extortionists. They're still dangerous, they're still sharp, but they've become exactly what they claimed not to be, thugs with better branding. Even as you rise through their ranks, rebuilding their name, you never quite erase the feeling that they've lost something vital, some principle or pride they used to stand for. Beneath the streets of Riften lies the Ratway, a literal metaphor for what the city has become. Cramped tunnels, broken bridges, bandits, druggies, and a secret society of thieves who sleep on mouldy cots next to murderers. It's a brilliant piece of environmental storytelling. Riften is rotting from the bottom up, literally. You don't find hope down there. You don't find reformers. All you find are cynics and some survivors. And as you navigate those tunnels, taking side quests, hunting down traitors, dodging skeevers, you start to realise that the Ratway isn't just a location. It's a philosophy. Down here, nothing is sacred. Technically, Riften is ruled by Jarl Layla Lawgiver. She's well-meaning. She talks of justice, stability, and the people's will. But none of it even matters, because Maven Blackbriar stands behind her throne and the guards wear Maven's gold. Layla's son is wrapped up in forsworn conspiracies, her court mage is under suspicion, and her hold, the Rift, is slipping into chaos at the edges. You can complete the Civil War questline, you can install a new Jarl, you can overthrow Ulfric or the Empire. And Riften? Well, it barely changes. Because the problem here isn't political, it's systematic. The rot isn't in the title, it's in the walls. You'd think a city this cynical wouldn't have much time for romance. But in actuality, Riften is full of broken relationships. A woman searching for a lost brother, only to find the corpse in the Ratway. An orphanage so abusive that the children cheer when the caretaker dies. Lovers who run a stable but have no coin to get married. Saphir, a carpenter who fears her trade is dying. Romlin, a mead smuggler with no way out. Even the Temple of Mara, dedicated to love and healing, feels hollow, like it's playing at hope in a city that eats it alive. You can help some of these people, fix a few cracks, but most of them, they stay stuck. Because Riften isn't built to let people go, it's built to hold them down. No discussion of Riften is complete without mentioning Honor Hall Orphanage, ran by Greylod the Kind, who is anything but. It's one of Skyrim's most disturbing side locations. Children trapped under verbal abuse, hope deferred, dreams crushed. And when you finally remove her from power, there's no oversight, no inspection, no change in policy. Just a new caretaker and a silent shrug from the guards. Riften sees suffering like background noise. It's just part of the ambience. Skyrim's entire political map is burning. Cities are falling, Jarls change hands, borders bleed. And yet Riften mostly watches. It should be a crucial city, bordering Morrowind, housing a major criminal guild, and riddled with influence. But instead, it's left to fester. No battle ever reaches its walls, no lasting change sweeps its streets. Even when you hand the Rift to the Empire or Stormcloaks, the city remains almost comically unaffected. Because Riften isn't a city caught between factions. It's a city that's already been conquered. Still, there's something about Riften. The canals shimmer in the summer light. Leaves scatter along the walkways. The city glows gold before the storm. And once in a while you'll find a moment. Just a moment where it feels like it could be something more. A merchant smiling as he fixes his stall. A guard pausing to help a child. A note passed beneath a temple door. These aren't quests, not mechanics, but fragments. Little reminders that even the most problematic places can still carry beauty. Not because they hide their darkness, but because they survive it. But here's the real trick Riften plays. It reflects you. Are you a thief? It welcomes you. A vigilante? It resists you. A hero? It mocks you. No matter how you approach it, Riften bends, but never breaks. And that's what makes it so compelling. Other cities in Skyrim reward you for action, but Riften just asks, why bother? Because here, justice won't remember you, charity won't matter, and redemption, well, it costs more than most can pay. Canals run beneath every street, docks line its south edge, fish swim through the green-tinted shallows. You'd think all this water would make the place feel alive, like Windhelm's icy harbour, or Solitude's crashing cliffs. But in Riften, the water doesn't purify, it collects. It swirls through sewers, leaks through floorboards, pools under the Ratway like a disease that's sunk too deep to drain. It's not just an aesthetic choice, it's a metaphor for the entire city. Riften is problematic, corrupt, complacent, cynical. It punishes kindness, rewards cruelty, smiles at suffering, and yet it endures. That might be the most Skyrim thing about it, because in this world, not every Skyrim city gets saved. Not every villain gets punished. Not every heart gets healed. Some cities just persist, flawed, fractured, and far too real. In Skyrim, factions are not just clubs or organisations. They are entire worlds that players step into. The Companions promise honour. The College of Winterhold offers knowledge. The Dark Brotherhood whispers of murder and fate. But no faction embodies the art of deception, secrecy, and manipulation quite like the Thieves Guild. Hidden in the damp sewers of Riften, the Guild is not only a collection of criminals, but a shadow empire, controlling smuggling routes, extorting businesses, and bending the will of an entire city. While other factions in Skyrim draw their strength from tradition, honour, or divine power, the Thieves Guild thrives on something more insidious: fear and influence. It is for these reasons, their underhanded methods, their systematic corruption, and their ability to remain hidden in plain sight, that the Thieves Guild earns the title as the most problematic faction in all of Skyrim. Riften itself sets the stage for the Thieves Guild's dominance. The city is the most corrupt in Skyrim, a place where guards look the other way for coin, where the Jarl's court is heavily influenced by Maven Blackbriar, and where ordinary citizens live in constant fear of extortion. Unlike Solitude, which radiates stability, or Whiterun, which acts as a neutral heart of Skyrim, Riften is rotting from the inside. Its marketplace bustles with trade, but behind every stall lies an unspoken truth. The Guild controls what happens here. This atmosphere of moral decay makes Riften the perfect home for the Thieves Guild. It's not that the Guild simply operates within Riften. It owns it, directly and indirectly. No other faction is so thoroughly tied to the corruption of an entire city. The Thieves Guild thrives on secrecy. Its base of operations is the Ragged Flagon, buried beneath the city in a maze of sewers and canals called the Ratway. To even reach the Guild, the Dragonborn must navigate through thieves, cutthroats, and drunks, symbolising how the path into the Guild itself is a descent into the underworld. The Ragged Flagon is more than just a hideout. It's a shadow economy. Smugglers, informants, fencers, and mercenaries gather here, away from the prying eyes of the surface. It is a city beneath a city, where coin changes hands, contracts are made, and lives are ruined without ever touching the daylight. This hidden structure makes the Guild different from other factions. The Companions proudly train. The College towers visibly over Winterhold. The Dark Brotherhood hides its base, yes, but even it lacks the sense of an underground society that the Guild embodies. The Thieves Guild's environment screams secrecy, deception, and a life lived in the shadows. Perhaps the most devious aspects of the Thieves Guild is not its heists or burglaries, but its quiet grip on the lives of ordinary citizens. Through intimidation and extortion, the Guild forces Riften's shopkeepers to pay protection money. At first glance, these may seem like small operations. Lean on a blacksmith, rough up a merchant, smash a few items in someone's stall. But the larger picture reveals a system of fear. Every shopkeeper in Riften knows that the Guild can ruin them at any time. Even when Maven Blackbriar isn't directly mentioned, her shadow looms behind every transaction. Unlike the Dark Brotherhood, which kills targets in secret, or the Companions who take contracts for glory, the Thieves Guild thrives on systematic oppression. Their crimes are not spectacular, but mundane. Woven into daily life, that is what makes them so insidious. They turn crime into governance. The most devious part of the Thieves Guild is not its members in the Ratway, but its patron, Maven Blackbriar. Maven is not officially part of the Guild, yet she is the beating heart of it. She bankrolls in its operation, shields it from legal consequences, and leverages it for her own personal empire. The guards in Riften answer to her more than to the Jarl. Even the Guildmaster, once restored, works under her thumb. This is what sets the Thieves Guild apart from other factions. No matter how far you rise in its ranks, you are never truly in control. The Dark Brotherhood makes you a listener. The College names you Archmage. But the Thieves Guild, you are just Maven's servant. This dynamic makes the faction particularly devious. It is not about personal empowerment, but submission to a crime lord who embodies corruption at its highest level. Maven is the spider at the center of the web, and everyone else, Dragonborn included, dances on her strings. Joining the Thieves Guild is unlike joining other factions. While the companions in college welcome you with rituals and traditions, the Thieves Guild tests you through manipulation and crime. You are asked to bully shopkeepers, sabotage livelihoods, and betray trust before you are even considered. This initiation is telling. The guild doesn't want heroes or seekers of knowledge. It wants people willing to do whatever it takes for coin, no matter the cost to others. By forcing the Dragonborn into petty, moral, dubious acts right from the start, the guild establishes its problematic nature immediately. The deeper the player goes, the more the jobs reflect large-scale manipulation. Forging documents, framing innocence, breaking alliances. It is not about violence, but control. About pulling strings and ensuring others dance to your will. One of the guild's most interesting aspects is its narrative arc. When you first encounter them, they are in a decline. Their influence waning, their numbers shrinking, their enemies emboldened. The streets of Riften whisper about their weaknesses, and many citizens believe the guild's reign is over. But through the Dragonborn's action, the guild rises again, reclaiming power not just in Riften, but across Skyrim as well. Gold flows back into the coffers, influence spreads, and the guild reasserts itself as a shadow empire. This fall and rise structure highlights the guild's adaptability. Unlike the Dark Brotherhood, which collapses entirely in Skyrim, the Thieves Guild thrives in the endgame, re-establishing itself as a major force. This resilience is part of what makes them devious. No matter how far they fall, they find a way to claw back to power, using lies, deals, and betrayals. While the Thieves Guild operates as a collective, it is ultimately an extension of the Blackbriar family. Maven's control ensures that her descendants and allies benefit from the guild's dominance. In this way, the guild becomes less about thievery and more about dynasty, ensuring that corruption is passed down like a crown. This fusion of organised crime and noble family legacy makes the guild particularly unsettling. It is not just random theft, but institutionalised corruption. It blurs the line between criminal underworld and legitimate power, showing how deeply the shadows can intertwine with Skyrim's political landscape. When compared to Skyrim's other factions, the Thieves Guild stands apart in its problems. The Companions, honourable mercenaries bound by tradition. Their secret is more curse than scheme. The College of Winterhold, scholars and mages seeking knowledge, dangerous but not manipulative at all. The Dark Brotherhood, assassins who kill for contracts, terrifying but straightforward in their purpose. The Thieves Guild, they don't just steal, they dominate. Their crime is systematic, their corruption total, and their power hidden behind noble facades. It is this difference, the blending of crime with politics, and the ability to make corruption invisible, that earns them their title. Skyrim is filled with danger. Dragons circle mountain peaks. Falmer stalk the underground. Vampires hide in frozen crypts. But there is one dungeon that feels different. One that does not simply house danger. It is danger. Hidden in the mountains of the Reach, far from the safety of cities, and far from the comfort of main quest lines, lies Valthuma. At first glance, it appears to be just another Nordic ruin. Ancient stone, moss-covered walls, Draga waiting in silence. The kind of place you clear once and forget. But it is not just another tomb. It is a prison, and it's failing. Valthuma is the resting place of Hevnarak, a dragon priest whose name is not spoken with the same reverence or fear as some of the others. But that may be a mistake, because he is not merely powerful, he is patient. Long ago, during the height of the dragon cult, he sought immortality not through loyalty to dragons, but through forbidden alchemical experimentation. His obsession with plague, poison, and unnatural longevity made him feared even among his own kind. The ancient Nords understood something terrifying. Hevnerak was not content with death, so they sealed him away in Valthuma. But they didn't simply entomb him. They built layers of containment, and that is what makes this dungeon different. It is not a resting place, it is a warning. Most Nordic ruins are tombs of reverence, burial chambers for honoured warriors who rise as Draga to defend sacred halls. Valthuma feels wrong from the moment you enter. The architecture is heavy, oppressive. Narrow corridors wind deeper into the earth, as if the structure itself is trying to suffocate whatever lies below. This is not a monument, it is a vault, and like any vault, it has keys. Before you can reach Hevnerak, you must confront and defeat two powerful dragon priest guardians, ancient wardens placed there specifically to prevent resurrection. Their presence reveals something important. The ancient Nords feared what lay beneath more than they feared invasion. They didn't want to honour Hevnerak, they wanted to contain him. That alone elevates this dungeon above most of Skyrim's other dungeons. It was designed with paranoia. What makes Valthuma uniquely dangerous is that the Dragonborn must participate in the very act the ancient Nords sought to prevent. To face Hevnerak, you must complete a ritual. You gather the ceremonial skulls, you unlock inner chambers, you activate the final confrontation. In doing so, you become the final key. This is one of Skyrim's most subtle narrative traps. The dungeon is structured so that the player inadvertently finishes what history tried to stop. The Guardians you defeat were not protecting treasure, they were protecting the world. And once Hevnerak awakens, it becomes clear why. Unlike many dragon priests, Hevnerak specializes in poison and disease. His mask grants immunity to poison and resistance to disease, reflecting his obsession with biological corruption. He is not just a mage, he's a plague bearer. In a world where most enemies rely on brute force, Hevnerak represents something insidious, slow, inevitable decay. Valthuma's location in the Reach is no coincidence. The Reach is already one of Skyrim's most unstable regions. Forsworn rebels wage guerrilla war against Markarth. Dwemer ruins dot the cliffs. Political corruption festers within the city walls. It is a land of old grudges and buried horrors. Placing Valthuma here reinforces its danger. The Reach is symbolic of things buried but never resolved. And beneath it lies a dragon priest who embodies the same theme. Hevnerak's imprisonment mirrors the Reach itself. Ancient violence sealed away, but never truly erased. If this dungeon were to fall unchecked, the Reach would be the first to suffer. And given its fragile state, it might not survive. There are more difficult dungeons in Skyrim mechanically. There are larger ones, more complex ones. But few feel as claustrophobic and tense as Valthuma. The deeper you go, the more deliberate the structure feels. There are no grand open caverns like Blackreach, no sprawling Dwemer machinery, no dramatic waterfalls. Just stone. Stone and silence. The dungeon compresses you as you go. It forces close combat with Draga Deathlords in narrow hallways. It denies open strategy. It corners you. By the time you reach the ritual chamber, you feel trapped, as though you have descended too far to retreat comfortably. That psychological design makes this dungeon dangerous beyond its enemies. It pressures the player. Most dragon priests persuade power through dragon worship. Hevnerak pursued something colder. His mask's properties suggest a fixation on resisting corruption and decay. He wasn't trying to conquer kingdoms, he was trying to conquer his own biology. That makes him uniquely terrifying. Poison and disease are democratic forces. They do not discriminate. They do not respect power. In a medieval world like Skyrim, plague could wipe out holds. The ancient Nords likely understood that Hevnerak's experiments were not simply heretical, they were existential threats. He was not a warlord, he was a scientist without ethics, and that makes him far more dangerous. Valdhuma is deceptive in another way. It is accessible relatively early. There are no level gates, no quest prerequisites demanding high progression. An inexperienced Dragonborn can wander into this dungeon and awaken something far beyond their readiness. And because the ritual is structured as a progression puzzle rather than a clear warning, players not realise the scale of what they're unlocking until it's too late. That subtle trap makes it one of the most dangerous dungeons for unsuspecting adventurers. You think you're clearing a ruin, but you're really breaking a seal. After defeating Hevnerak, you claim his mask, a powerful artifact granting poison immunity and disease resistance. On the surface, it's just loot, but symbolically it represents inheritance. You now carry the legacy of the Plague Priest. You wear the face of a man who experimented with death itself. There's something quietly unsettling about that. Skyrim rarely forces players to confront the morality of the artifacts they collect. But Valdhuma lingers. You did what the ancient Nords failed to do permanently. You woke him, and then you ended him. But you also proved that his prison was fragile. What if someone less capable had entered? Many Skyrim dungeons are dangerous because of spectacle. Labyrinthian is epic. Forelhost is tragic. Blackreach is overwhelming. Valdhuma is different. Its danger lies in implication. It is a prison barely holding. It is a ritual waiting to be completed. It is a dragon priest obsessed with plague, sealed beneath an already unstable hold. And most players stumble upon it accidentally. That combination, accessibility, narrative depth, atmospheric pressure, and moral implication elevates it above Skyrim's other ruins. It feels less like a dungeon and more like a mistake waiting to happen. When you leave Valdhuma, the world continues as normal. Markarth still stands, the Reach still rebels, dragons still roam the skies. But something lingers. You know that beneath the mountains, ancient horrors were not simply buried, they were feared. And you know that if history forgets why a prison was built, someone will eventually open it. Valdhuma is not the most famous dungeon, it is not the largest, it does not house the final boss of the game, but it embodies Skyrim's most dangerous truth. Not all ruins are meant to be explored, some are meant to remain sealed. And when curiosity overrides caution, the consequences echo far beyond stone walls. Hevnerak is gone, but the lesson remains. In a land of dragons and war, sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that waits quietly beneath your feet. What makes a place problematic in Skyrim isn't always the enemies waiting inside it. More often, it's the problems that can't be solved with a sword. A dragon can be defeated, a bandit camp can be cleared, but fear, corruption, isolation, exploitation, and centuries of buried history are far more difficult to erase. Some locations are built on dangerous foundations. Others are trapped by their geography, haunted by unanswered questions, or caught in cycles that continue long after the Dragonborn has moved on. You may complete the quest, claim the reward, and leave, but the place itself rarely changes in any meaningful way. That's what makes these locations so fascinating. They feel like genuine communities and landmarks with problems that existed before you arrived, and will likely continue after you've gone. They don't revolve around the player, instead the player simply passes through lives and spaces already carrying the weight of their own history. And perhaps that's what Skyrim does best. Beneath the dragons and prophecies lies a province filled with flawed places, complicated people, and problems with no perfect solution. Those are the locations that stay with you long after the adventure is over.